This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Early in the month, you might have seen this video. I did a video called How the Pros Learn Hours and Hours of Music, and I asked a few buddies, Rob Harris from Jamiroquai, Joe Harris, who's a local drummer, plays with the guitarist Toby Lee, who was actually in Norway with him yesterday, and Paddy Blight, who's bassist, plays with like the Hoosiers. He recently got a fairly last-minute gig with Robin Ford, like has played with some of our heroes. And I had this gig where I heard or got through the set list on the Sunday, and I had the gig on the Saturday, so sort of 6 days. I got the set list. It was 39 songs long. Though I've been doing this sort of thing for like a decade nearly at this point, there was way over 20 songs in there that were new. And not only that, but it was kind of different arrangements. So something like 39 songs that I needed to figure out and learn. And I asked those guys how they would do this job, and I've done that video already. But before I'd spoken to them even, I had already filmed this part talking about my own process. Now, what I thought was really interesting to me was how similar all of this was, and that how for no one basically that I'd asked was it a simple process. For everyone it takes quite a lot of time. Now, there is one other person that I spoke to, the keyboard player that plays in my band, Joe Tong, who actually had a different process to all of us, and maybe that's worth going over at some other stage. But he actually just listens to the tune and writes a chart. And doesn't do this thing that we do of essentially, which is a lot of listening throughout the week or even weeks leading up to a gig. Joe just actually kind of does it over one session. I thought that was interesting. But anyway, this is my process and how I got through and did the gig. It went pretty well. There wasn't any sort of howling exceptions, and the client was actually very happy and complimentary about the band. So we got away with it. But yeah, this was one of those occasions where I got that set list through and I was like quite stressed about it and like, well, how am I going to do this? Which oftentimes is actually the case. You think, oh, that is a lot of songs. How am I going to fit this into the week? This is how I did it. And it's worth mentioning that this is kind of material that is not too challenging to play. Like, it's Motown stuff, it's kind of soul stuff. There are different kind of needs for different gigs, and you know, for instance, the week after I did this, I had to try and play the Beat It solo and Dancing on the Ceiling, which is a whole different kind of situation, because it's like you have to learn solos note for note. It takes more time and more honing in on really specific parts, whereas Motown is kind of like you need to know the structure and soul stuff and you know, where the changes are, but not so much like these really tricky, intricate parts. So it's different for lots of different people. So here's how I did this particular job. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope this is kind of an interesting video. It's kind of one of these things that I had never really seen anyone talking about, and I thought, I wonder how other people do this. So yeah, 2 videos on it.
Okay, I wanted to do a video on this as a topic, which I think is the hardest aspect of being a working, gigging musician. Now, I think obviously the dream is to have a full diary, right? As a working guitarist, whatever the type of gigs are. Now, here's the thing, you don't actually get paid to practice and learn set lists. And I think this is something that it takes a while to actually figure out, and you don't really factor this in to the idea of trying to make a living doing this sort of thing. And to get a really full diary, you're probably going to have to take on gigs where you've not played with the band before. We call these dep gigs in the UK. You've probably got different names for them overseas. And what it necessarily might mean is that you've got to learn set list occasionally. Now, I've got a gig on Saturday. It's now Tuesday when I'm making this video. I got sent the set list on Sunday night, so less than a week. And I get the set list. There's 16 songs in the first set. There's 15 in the second set. So we're already at 31. And then an additional 30 minutes, which we're actually getting paid extra to do. So that's a plus. But the downside is another 8 songs. So that's 39 songs that I've got less than a week to learn. This is a fairly extreme example, to be fair. I used to play with this collective, some of the earliest work I got, 2015, 2016. However, I've not played a lot of this stuff before. So my first step with this is to sort of highlight the things that are new to me. So I go through with a pen and I say, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So there's 24 songs there out of the 39 that I'm not really familiar with enough to just play. So I guess the first point is that it'll be fairly unusual unless you're doing kind of someone's original music, that there'll be like a whole set list which is brand new to you unless you're very new to this. But even so, that's still a lot of songs to learn, right? So there's over 20 there. It is definitely a juggling thing, and you oftentimes will think, am I going to get this done at all? So who knows? But by me making this video, I'm talking about it when I should really be going and listening to this stuff again and again. So that's phase one for me, is I get a playlist together of the stuff that is pretty new to me. And I need to have that playing if I'm driving in the car. I'll have it playing sort of in the house, and try and listen to it and try and be actively listening for bits that I need to focus on more. And this is one way to kind of sort of lessen the workload a little bit, is to have your kind of time where you might be listening to a podcast normally, so like in the car or just relaxing, fill that time up with listening to the set list that you need to learn, or the songs that you need to learn. Sometimes if you're feeling like there is a bit of an active kind of thing going on in your brain, you might want to listen to the same thing a couple of times and try and sing along with it. So that's kind of the very first phase. And also early on, what I think, and I've heard this advice from other places, like in terms of task management, it makes sense to do the easiest tasks first. So if you get a sense whilst you're listening to it for what these tunes might be like to play, maybe you start listening and learning to the first ones. So I did a bit of this yesterday. On the first set, I've got Hard to Handle, Loco in Acapulco, Get Ready, I Wish, Soul Man, Stand By Me, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and Blame It on the Boogie into I Want You Back. Now, I've played Hard to Handle and listened to it maybe a decade ago, but that was one of the first ones that I gave it a listen to. And you're listening for parts, and you're listening for chords, and you're listening to structure. It's tricky, a lot of this stuff. So chords in particular, I'm not super picky about getting the exact voicings. When you've got a task this size, you have to be realistic about what it is that you can actually be able to take in sort of 6 days, without ploughing loads and loads and loads and loads of time into super analysing like single things. So yeah, it's just not going to be possible for me to go through and get every single chord voicing nailed. And I think that's probably the reality of most function band musicians, right? You try and approximate the part, you give it a good faith effort, but the fact is I've got a life, and you know, learning all of that in 6 days is just not going to be possible. So you're listening for chords, listening to structures, and listening for important parts, and being able to sort of approximate a groove or your own version of a groove, and listening specifically for kind of stabs and stuff like that. Now, what I also might suggest is going to be a good idea for me is that next to each of these songs, I might write if there's something significant that happens in that song that I need to kind of remember. So Hard to Handle, I noticed that it actually does a different thing after the second chorus and the third chorus. This is in my head. Let me try and see if I can remember. So second and third time round, it kind of goes. Right, so it does that after the chorus. The first time it goes. It ends with. Something like that. Anyway, I can't remember it, is what I'm quickly finding out here. So I'm going to have to go back and revise this. And this is another thing that you kind of get the sense for. Like, you try and remember a thing, and without like sort of, because I don't want to play with an iPad with all the notes on it, you're going to have to kind of revise like you would for an exam. Yes, another thing I might be considering writing down would be, is there a key change? Is there something unusual? and also make a note if there is like a stab section that you need to look at and again, so that when I come back, you know, a couple of days time, I can kind of eyeball down the set list and look at where are the specific bits that I need to specifically focus in on. So that might be a stab section where I need to go, I don't know, just as an example. Whatever the stab section might be, that I'm knowing what it's going to go like, and so that it's not, yeah, something that I miss when I need to revise the set list. And also, I think a part of what I'm saying here is that on like the first day that you start listening to the set list, I like to try and tick a few things off so that I feel like I've done something, so that at least in my mind it feels like I've got somewhere nearer to getting the task done. So I think there was one tune yesterday, Get Ready, that I used to play. So I kind of ticked that one off the list. I wish I used to play, so I sort of ticked that one off the list as well by giving it a quick kind of revise. Soul Man I played before, but in another key, so I kind of ticked that off the list. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, I needed to just kind of quickly revise. So yeah, making a bit of progress early on so that you feel like you've started to get ahead of a task a bit, because it is definitely kind of overwhelming to start off with. So it's day 2 now, so I think what I'm going to do is kind of just go over what I did yesterday kind of quickly. So like the first 3 songs that I kind of did, so Hard to Handle, Loco and Acapulco, Get Ready, I Wish, Soul Man. Try and sort of revise, go back over the work that I did before, and then again each day try and kind of step into some new songs. So this morning when I first got up, I was listening to Dancing in the Streets. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So I'm listening as well for progressions. So in my head, this is something I didn't used to do as much early on, but in my head I'm really closely thinking about what key I'm playing in as I'm breaking apart what's going on. So that kind of helps to help remember the progression. So I'm not thinking about a chord necessarily by chord name as much as I'm trying to remember like the function of the chord and what the progression goes like. And if it's particularly odd, I might again make a note next to it that I need to kind of revise that. So that is how I'm trying to tackle this at this stage. I might come back and revisit this a bit later in the week, but it's definitely a challenge, and it's not something that you get kind of confident with the idea of doing it, but it is always, particularly for me, like when I see this many things to learn, still like a juggling act where you're thinking like there are going to be things that I get wrong a little bit, right? No one's going to be perfect at this kind of thing. At least I don't think I am going to be. But so I have to allow myself that there are going to be kind of things that I might get wrong, but I'm going to give it my best effort to kind of try and put some time into this, right?